And one of the reasons that our technology is impeded and prevented from feeding the world properly is the failure of one of our networks. It's an information network, and it's called money, about which we have the most unbelievable superstitions and psychological blocks, which have been gone into at some length by Freud, who equates our valuation of money with our attitude to excrement, and a very complicated lot of complexes grow up around that. But money and our psychological attitude to money is a major obstacle to a proper development of technology, enabling it to do what it is supposed to do, that is, to save labor and to produce goods, services, and so on adequately. So I must introduce this with a story which is entirely legendary, indeed quite apocryphal. The great banks of the world, at one time, got absolutely sick of the expense and security measures involved in shipping consignments of gold from one bank to another. And so they decided that all the chief banks of the world would open offices on a certain island in the South Pacific, which was balmy and comfortable. And there they would store all the gold in the world. And they put it in great subterranean vaults reached by deep elevator shafts. And then all they had to do when one bank or one country owed gold to another was to trundle it across the street. And this was very efficient. And it went on beautifully for 5 or 6 years. And then the presidents of the World Banks got together and said, let's have a convention out on this island. Take our wives and families. So, about 7 years from the date of opening, all those presidents and their wives and families went out to this Pacific island. And they inspected the books. And everything was beautifully in order. Then the children said, oh, Daddy, can't we see the gold? They said, of course you may see the gold. And they said to the managers, let's take our children down to the vaults and show them the gold. And the managers said, well, it's a little bit inconvenient at this time, and perhaps the children would not really be very interested. After all, it's just only old plate gold. And the president said, oh, no, come now. They'd be thrilled. Let's go down and see. There was further humming and hawing and delays. And finally it came out that a few years before, there had been a catastrophic subterranean earthquake. And all the vaults had been swallowed up and all the gold had disappeared. But so far as the bookkeeping was concerned, everything was in perfect order. What this means then is that money is nothing but bookkeeping. It is figures. It is a way of measuring what you owe the community and what the community owes you. It is, of course, as you all know, a substitute for barter. If you worked on a farm and the farmer paid you in terms of ears of corn, onions, cabbages, and other vegetables, and yet you wanted a pot and pan of some kind, and you took a few vegetables over to the man who so made pots and pans, and you swapped. Some people used cowrie shells to stand for money so that you wouldn't have to barter and carry around all these inconvenient loads of goods. And then, of course, gold was used, because gold was rare, because gold was supposed to have a constant value. I wonder often if there's any relationship between guilt and gold, that the love of money is the root of evil. Very true saying. Because you see, I was saying yesterday that the difference between having a job and having a vocation is that a job is some unpleasant work you do in order to make money, with the sole purpose of making money. And there are plenty of jobs because there is still a certain amount of dirty work that nobody wants to do, and that therefore they will pay someone to do it. There is essentially less and less of that kind of work because of mechanization. But if you do a job with the sole purpose of making money, you are absurd. Because if money becomes the goal, and it does when you work that way, you begin increasingly to confuse it with happiness or with pleasure. It goes back, you see, to the ancient guilt that if you don't work, you have no right to eat. That if there are others in the world who don't have enough to eat, you shouldn't enjoy your dinner even though you have no possible means of conveying the food to them. And while it is true that we are all one human family, and that every individual involves every other individual, while it is true, therefore, we should do something about changing the situation, the one way of not doing anything about a situation is feeling guilty about it. Because when people feel guilty about a situation, they most usually, instead of doing something practical to change it, they resort to all sorts of symbolic methods of expiation. They go to confession. They see an analyst. They do all kinds of things which will be ways of actually not doing anything about the problem, but feeling all right about it instead. And guilt invariably produces that sort of reaction. It is a destructive emotion. And instead, we need to have a different attitude to our mistakes and to our misdeeds. Walt Whitman always admired animals because they do not lie awake at night and weep for their sins. Animals are practical in the real sense, as are children who haven't been taught this extraordinary hang-up of guilt. Because if you have done something wrong or you have made a mistake, and somebody makes you ashamed of it and guilty, you run around licking the sores of your wounded ego because you feel your pride has been hurt. The first thing to understand is that it is not a serious failing in a human being to make mistakes. Everybody has to make mistakes. There is no way out of it. You can't learn anything unless you make mistakes. We find, for example, in Japan, the Japanese have a terrible hang-up about making mistakes. They, therefore, never have the courage to practice their English properly. They've had 7 years of English in school, most of it very, very badly taught. And it's irrelevant English. They learn all about Shakespeare and Dickens and Thackeray and Thomas Hardy and so on. And therefore they can't carry on an everyday conversation. It's like the way the English study French. All about pens of gardener's aunts and things like that. And but they are ashamed to try out their English unless drunk. So if you want to get into conversation with the Japanese in English, you have to go to bars. And then they say university students and so on there will loosen up and talk. Because they no longer have the inhibition, the shame of saying the wrong thing. So, you know, this is a way of taking away people's blockage, people's guilt and shame about making mistakes. So you absolutely, freedom means basically, the freedom to make mistakes.